or 3 degrees further to the south and east. Into Monday evening, it's a relatively similar picture, but because we've now got the cloud filtering its way into the far southeast, the frost will just hold off a bit more here, and it'll be that central slice of England where temperatures will readily drop off once again. As we move into the rest of the week, that cloud in the north and west is slowly going to push its way southwards with this frontal system. So we will eventually see some cloudier and also milder conditions across southern areas of England as we move towards the middle of the week. Behind that cold front, though, we will see an ingress of some slightly colder air, so temperatures will fall off a bit for the likes of Edinburgh and Belfast, but not too cold, more around average for the time of year by the time we get to Wednesday and Thursday. See you later.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello and welcome. This is Calvin's Common Sense Crusade on your TV, online and on your wireless. Today we will be discussing the Church of England's refusal to redefine marriage to accommodate same-sex relationships. The case of a man who was fined for allegedly being in breach of a public space protection order by praying near to an abortion clinic, and should conversion therapy for trans people be banned? But first, it's the news with Aaron Armstrong.
Good afternoon, it's 3:01. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. A manhunt is underway in California after at least 10 people were killed in a shooting at a Lunar New Year festival. A warning: the following contains flashing images. Thousands of people had gathered at Monterey Park near Los Angeles when a gunman opened fire. At least 10 other people have been injured, some of whom are in a critical condition. Police are looking for a male suspect who fled the scene. They say it's too early to determine his motive. Labour's calling for an urgent investigation into claims the chairman of the BBC, Richard Sharp, helped Boris Johnson arrange a loan weeks before the then Prime Minister recommended Sharp for the job. The Sunday Times claims Mr Sharp helped Boris Johnson secure a guarantor for a loan of up to £800,000 when he was in financial difficulty in late 2020. Sharp was then announced as the government's choice for the BBC position in January 2021. Both men say there was no conflict of interest, but Labour and the SNP have called for an independent inquiry. Meanwhile, a Cabinet Minister's told GB News Nadhim Zahawi has the Prime Minister's support following allegations about his tax affairs. The Conservative Party chairman's admitted he reached a settlement with HMRC, believed to be almost £5 million, following an error over a shareholding sale in the polling company YouGov. Labour has called his position untenable, but the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says he believes Mr Zahawi's paid his taxes.
I don't know any more details than what he has already put in the public domain. I don't think it would be right or proper for me to speculate or guess about any further details about his tax affairs. But he has been a successful entrepreneur, building a company which has paid tax, employing people who have paid taxes, and he has himself paid tax, a considerable amount, because he's been successful.
The government says energy firms should stop forcing lower-income households to switch to prepayment meters. The Business Secretary, Grant Shapps, has threatened to name and shame energy suppliers who aren't doing enough to help vulnerable people pay their bills. The energy companies have also been asked by Mr Shapps to reveal the number of warrant applications they've made to enter properties. European countries are putting renewed pressure on Germany to authorise the supply of its tanks to Ukraine. Several countries want to send their German-made Leopard tanks, but they need Berlin to give it the green light. Latvia, Estonia and Lithuania say Germany, as a leading European power, has a special responsibility in restoring peace on the continent. Berlin, though, insists it's not blocking deliveries and is yet to make a decision about supplying its tanks to Ukraine. US investigators have found more classified documents during a 13-hour search of President Joe Biden's home in Delaware. Some were from Biden's time as a senator, others from when he served as vice president under Barack Obama. They're the latest in a series of classified documents to have been found in his possession. Former President Donald Trump is facing a criminal investigation over his handling of sensitive documents. At least 300 migrants have arrived in the UK on 8 small boats overnight, making it the busiest day of channel crossings this year. GB News understands several other boats also set off earlier today but haven't yet made it to the UK. Well, the boats are monitored by French naval vessels, which can only intervene if the migrants get into difficulties. Today's arrivals bring the total number of those crossing the channel this year to 450. The Scottish Environment Minister says the use of dogs to hunt and kill wild animals has no place in modern Scotland. Mary McCallan's comments come ahead of next week's vote on the new Hunting with Dogs bill. Since 2002, it's been against the law to hunt a wild animal with a dog. The new bill is expected to close loopholes in current laws. And Buckingham Palace has revealed the Queen will be crowned alongside the King in a break with tradition at the Coronation in May. The ceremony will be conducted by the Archbishop of Canterbury at Westminster Abbey. A concert will be held at Windsor Castle the following day, featuring what the palace have described as global music icons. Thousands of events are expected to take place across the country, with a bank holiday declared for Monday the 8th. That's it for the moment. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, it's back to Calvin.
Hello and welcome to the Common Sense Crusade with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson. Here's what's coming up this afternoon. The Church of England says it's sorry for its past treatment of LGBT people this week, but said it would continue its practice of not allowing same-sex marriages in church. But new proposals would allow individual clergy to offer blessings in churches following a civil marriage or partnership. But the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has said he personally would not bless same-sex couples. What do you think? Please send us in your thoughts. Then, an army veteran has been fined for silently praying outside an abortion facility in Bournemouth in breach of a Public Spaces Protection Order, or PSPO. We will discuss this. And then later on, the Equalities Minister, Kemi Badenoch, has set out her concerns over a proposed legislation surrounding the banning of conversion therapy. A source close to Mrs. Badenoch said the area of gender identity is much more complex than sexual orientation. We have said we will not inadvertently criminalise parents who are trying to support children. And of course, you can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or by tweeting @gbnews. Deus Vult. One of the very first topics we opened with on my Common Sense Crusade was the World Economic Forum. I did an explainer video about the WEF, which you can find on the GB News website. Over 2 million people across several platforms watched my rundown of the NGO's annual meeting in Davos. One of their taglines is "Build Back Better." I posed the question, build back better for whom? The WEF annual meeting 2023 took place this week in Davos, Switzerland, and in the name of journalism, I figured I should fly into the belly of the beast and see what I could find out firsthand. What a gorgeous town in an absolutely marvellous country. The snowy hills, the Swiss chocolate, and the incredibly polite people. I can see why the global elite chooses to hold their get-togethers in Davos. The entire town is taken over by the WEF. Practically every shop on the promenade is branded with the logo of a multinational global company. Big business, big tech, big finance, they are all at it. And where there isn't any space to take over a retail unit, they'll just bang one up. Shop fronts are fabricated for the week and then torn down after the conference is over. I'm not sure how sustainable that is, but I saw millionaires and billionaires flying in on their private jets before taking a helicopter closer to the conference location. So much for cutting carbon footprints as well. From the people I spoke to on the ground, there seemed to be no remorse or sense of self-awareness over any of this hypocrisy. They simply say it's offset by the work that they're doing there. The Knights of the Labour Party were in attendance, Sir Keir Starmer and Sir Tony Blair, and elements from the Conservatives too. Kemi Badenoch and Zach Goldsmith were on the attendee list. I even managed to get a few key questions to Greta Thunberg, which we'll show you later in the show. More interesting to me than who was there is who wasn't there. Bill Gates and George Soros were no-shows this year, as was our Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Klaus Schwab did show up late, skipping the opening ceremony. Could it be the tide is turning and that the global elites are being scared off because of the press attention this event is now garnering from the likes of GB News? I think we're lifting the veil behind the shadowy cabal of the global elite. It should be noted, GB News didn't send anyone out to cover the WEF annual meeting. I went out to Davos with the Rebel News guys in a personal capacity, and my expenses were crowdfunded. We've got some more Davos coverage coming up later in the show, so do stay tuned for that. The Archbishop of Canterbury has said he won't bless same-sex couples who are civilly married, but the Archbishop of York said he will after it emerged this week that the Church of England will not allow same-sex marriages in its churches. Bishops have proposed allowing same-sex couples who are civilly married to be blessed in church. The Church of England has also issued a formal apology to members of the LGBTQ community. Joining me now is Emeritus Professor of Theology and Religious Studies at Nottingham University, John Milbank, and author and broadcaster Rebecca Reed. Thank you both for joining me this Sunday. John, we'll start with you if you don't mind. Do you think the Church of England bishops have made the right decision here?
I think it's possible that they're moving towards a sensible compromise, which would be blessing gay relationships in church, but recognizing that they are something different from marriage. What I suppose at the moment is unclear is whether they're edging towards accepting same-sex marriage by putting a kind of sacral rubber stamp on civil marriage. So I think it's very important that they try to develop a theological account of why same-sex friendships, however erotically expressed physically, are valuable in their own right. And I think what most troubles me at the moment is a lack of a theology around any of this. Any theology of what marriage is, any theology of what sacral friendships might mean. And there are historical precedents for that. It hasn't just been invented yesterday.
And Rebecca, many people won't like this decision, but surely the Church of England has had to make a decision one way or the other if it's going to continue to stand for what it stands for and be relevant.
I mean, I think one of the great things historically about the Church of England was that individual vicars had a choice about what they would and wouldn't tolerate and what was right in their parish, and parishioners had a choice about where to go. And lots of people where I grew up would go to somewhere 20 minutes down the road rather than 5 minutes up the road because they felt more theologically aligned with the person in charge of that parish. And I think in terms of marriage, it's always worked perfectly well with divorce. It's an individual choice whether a vicar will or will not marry a divorced couple. And so I think trying to centralise everything and make everything one unilateral decision really takes away the fact that this isn't like the post office or the NHS. These are about individual relationships, not sort of generalised bureaucracy.
Okay, John, I'll come back to you. Because many people argue that if the Church of England is to attract more young people, it should allow same-sex marriages to be conducted in church because young people tend to be more liberally minded and in favour of gay marriage. What is your response to that?
My response?
Yes, please, John.
Yes. Sorry. Well, I simply don't think that this kind of sort of pandering to popular opinion works. I think most young people are simply not interested in religion or the church at all. And I think the kind of young people more likely to be interested are increasingly people who are countercultural, who are resistant to secular dominance, thinking things through seriously and theologically for themselves. So I think that that kind of concern is just incredibly short-sighted and all too likely to backfire.
And looking at the theology behind this, the church is quoting 1 John saying God is love, but forgetting the rest of the passage about love to God, being committing to God and conforming to God in his love. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I think love is not only expressed in marriage. I think marriage is a particularly acute and paradigmatic form of love, but I think it's tied to certain physical realities, that the human race is divided into male and female, that they are naturally fitted for a full sexual relationship, that men and women coming together somehow restore the unity of humanity, and they are able to have babies, to be procreative. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other forms of loving relationship that are creative in a different kind of way and have their own special gifts to offer, including same-sex relations. The point about love is that it's incredibly varied. It's the most infinitely varied thing that there possibly is. And we don't need to set up hierarchies here, but I think we do need to recognize differences and not get away from the facts. Because I think if we do that, we land up by covertly denigrating the importance of heterosexual married relationships and that absolute centrality for society and the perpetuation of the human race.
I'll come back to you on that, John, because I do want to address that hierarchy of love. But Rebecca, is this the problem? Are we confusing love and marriage? Because they are two very different things. Surely marriage is for the purposes of procreation, of family, of community, something very, very different to love that often includes love.
Well, I'm not sure, because there are so many different kinds of marriage and so many different kinds of love. And in my experience, when you get married in the church, you're not told that you have to have children. You're still in a perfectly legitimate marriage if you choose not to have children, or indeed if one of you is unable to have children. Plenty of women I know about their fertility before they get married and wouldn't expect to be told they couldn't marry in the church if they were not able to have a baby. I also would probably disagree with the idea that only men and women are appropriately equipped to have sexual relationships with each other. As a bisexual, I can attest that it is perfectly possible for two women to have sex, and indeed for two men to have sex. So I think the idea that we are unable to is not true. I suppose the question is, for you, what does marriage mean? And a sense for you, it's a man and a woman getting married so that they can have a family and create a community. For me, it was about having a big party, and I think probably feeling it was the appropriate way to raise children. For some other people, it's, for a stage period of their life, they may not be married forever. Marriage means different things to different people.
But to the church, it's very clear what marriage means. It's for the purpose of procreation. And you are told when you get married to go forth and multiply. You are told to have children and to not use contraception. And this is all part of
it. If you continue to have children, they don't refuse to marry you if you're infertile. Because otherwise,
that's two different things.
If two 65-year-old people
things. That's very important, Rebecca. Some people aren't able to have children, and that's very serious. That's completely different to people choosing not to have children or choosing not to get married.
Why are two 65-year-olds allowed to get married in the church?
Why are who?
Why would two 65-year-olds be allowed to get married in the church? They're not going to have any babies.
Well, that's a good point.
Oh, you haven't read the Bible in that case. It seems you don't know the Bible.
Who?
Well, the Bible is...
The point is that marriage is supposed to be open to the possibility of children, including miraculous.
In which case, why do the church marry older people?
Because you're still open to the possibility. I think that's John's point.
You think that 70-year-old? You think that when Prince Charles and Camilla got married, there was a chance they were going to have a baby?
Yes, that's possible.
You've simply missed the point. The point is that
to have a baby.
But older people have always been allowed to get married, but there's always been the idea that a marriage should be, in principle, open to having children. So that means
but why is it an exception if you can't have children because you're biologically too old, and it's not an exception if you are biologically not fitted?
But this is all the way back to Aquinas. This is down to the Church Fathers. This is in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. This is in the prayer book of the Anglican Church. That there are several reasons for marriage, and marriage within the Church is heterosexual and monogamous. And I don't see why people are trying to change that in order to catch up with social norms. But John, I'm going to come back to what you said about the hierarchy of love, because surely it's only love if it's in God's will. And if it goes against God's will, it's love of the world and not love of God. And there are two different types of love, right?
Well, all love, I think, is within God's will. And in historical terms, I am relatively liberal. I think that we should accept that some people are homosexual, some people are bisexual, and we should accept that homosexual people have there can be a kind of sacral friendship, and we shouldn't try to lay down norms about how that's physically expressed. I think that to pretend that full sex is not what heterosexual people do is simply to get away from the evident facts of life in an incredibly sort of prudish way. It's clear that the complete sexual act that is also procreative is only possible between a man and woman. And I think that part of the problem is supposing that there is full sex outside that. I think if we got away from that idea, we would simply see that we shouldn't be so bothered about the physical expression of homosexual relationships, and that it's perfectly valid and full of immense significance for them and productive of
I'm going to have to wrap there, John, unfortunately.
And so on.
But I think we need to return back to the Bible on that one. But thank you very much. That was Emeritus Professor of Theology at Nottingham University and author and broadcaster Rebecca Reed. Thank you both for your time today. Speaking about the Church's decision earlier this week, the Archbishop of Canterbury said, "I'm under no illusions that what we are proposing today will appear to go too far for some and not nearly enough for others. But it is my hope that what we have agreed will be received in a spirit of generosity, seeking the common good. Most of all, I hope it can offer a way for the Church of England publicly and unequivocally to say to all Christians, and especially LGBTQI+ people, that you are welcomed and valued and precious part of the body of Christ." And explaining his decision to not bless civilly married same-sex couples, he said, "I have a pastoral responsibility for the whole Anglican communion. While I will be extremely joyfully celebrating these new resources, I will not personally use them in order not to compromise that pastoral care." Plenty more to come this afternoon on my Common Sense Crusade. After the break then, an Army veteran has been fined for silently praying outside an abortion facility in Bournemouth in breach of a Public Spaces Protection Order, or PSPO. We will discuss that, but first, here is a short break.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons. I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to the Common Sense Crusade with me, Calvin Robinson, on your TV, online and on your wireless. Now, an Army veteran has been fined for silently praying outside an abortion facility in Bournemouth in breach of a Public Spaces Protection Order, or PSPO. Adam Smith-Connor was standing on a public street where the PSPO was in place, and many councils have implemented PSPOs around abortion facilities with the stated aim of stopping women being harassed. Here is a clip of Smith-Connor's interaction with the Community Safety Accredited Officers.
I'm praying for my son who's deceased.
I'm very sorry to hear. But ultimately, you have to go along the guidelines of the Public Space Protection Order.
Right.
They say that we are in the belief, therefore, that you are in breach of the law that says about prayer and also acts of disapproval around the activities at the clinic.
I'm just standing praying.
I understand that.
ADF UK, a faith-based legal advocacy organisation, is supporting Smith-Connor in challenging the fine. I'm now joined by Ryan Christopher, who is the director of ADF UK, and Scarlett Maguire, the former Labour advisor and writer. Mr. Smith-Connor could have challenged the PSPO prior to breaching it, but as we understand it, he did not. How do you respond to that, Ryan?
I wouldn't characterise what Adam did on that day as being a protest. That's how he describes it himself, and I think we should take his words seriously and his intentions as he describes them seriously. Adam went to a place of real deep personal significance for himself, and he stood there silently on his own, not bothering anyone, not approaching anyone, not talking to anyone, not announcing it, and silently prayed in his own mind for his deceased son. That's all that Adam did. Adam served in our armed forces for 20 years, defending our fundamental freedoms, and he now finds himself facing a fine from his local council because he prayed for his own son in the privacy of his own head. So this wasn't about Adam challenging some grand scheme, although the scheme is unjust and arbitrary and anti-democratic and illiberal, ultimately. He was just there to pray for his son on the day.
He broke the law by his actions, didn't he?
That's absolutely arguable. And Adam doesn't believe he did, in fact, break the law by his actions. He doesn't believe that it was possible to break the law by praying in his own mind. So the council officers interpreted that differently, and Adam isn't going to accept a fine for what he believes is absolutely reasonable activity.
And Scarlett, prayer is not proximate, it's not necessary to pray in that place. So a judge would likely find that the PSPOs struck the right balance between the right to protest and the right of individuals to lawfully access abortion centres without harassment or intimidation. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to say that buffer zones were set up around abortion clinics because of the women going there being harassed. Right. And so he might not have been harassing anybody. He was certainly in the buffer zone. Now, I do find it quite difficult that this is a man who paid for the abortion. He had no idea whether it was a boy or a girl. He now talks about it being his son, right? You can't tell. So this is a man who did it and who now regrets it, obviously, and repents. I do not understand why he has to stand outside. And it's not only that particular facility he stands outside. He said that he stood outside others. So I think we have to understand that the buffer zones were put in place because of the harassment of women going in to have abortions by people who felt they were wrong. And what they were doing is an absolutely lawful procedure. And the people who were harassing them were wrong. Right.
But was this harassment or was this overreach?
Well, it's a buffer zone. And the buffer zone, it's the thin end of the wedge, isn't it? So you have him and he's silent and then he turns round and he's not so silent. So what the councils have said, and there's a number in Britain, is there is a buffer zone and nobody goes in that buffer zone and only the women can walk through it.
How are these buffer zones not thought police?
We think they are thought crime, and the UK, if it is established that Adam in fact broke the PSPO, and we'll see about that, then these orders are the first thought crimes that we have in the UK as far as I'm aware of. And we'll be in really rarefied territory as a society or as a state if we are in fact enforcing thought crimes for the population. I used to be the secretary for the parliamentary group on North Korea, and that is the only country I'm aware of that has ever done anything remotely similar to this with regards to moving people on who are quietly doing something in their own mind because it might look like prayer.
Well, we'll cover more on this story as it progresses. Thank you very much, Ryan Christopher, Director at ADF UK, and Scarlett Maguire, former Labour advisor and writer. We reached out to Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council, where the PSPO is in place, for a comment, but they are yet to respond. You are with GB News on TV, radio and online, and after the break, the Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch has set out her concerns over a proposed legislation surrounding the banning of conversion therapy. A source close to Mrs Badenoch said the area of gender identity is much more complex than sexual orientation. We have said we will not inadvertently criminalise parents who are trying to support children. Now it's time for a check on those news headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
It's just after 3:30. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. A suspect is on the run in California after a shooting in which at least 10 people have been killed. Emergency services have been responding to an incident in Monterey Park near Los Angeles, where thousands of people had gathered for a Lunar New Year festival. Another 10 people have been taken to hospital to be treated for injuries, at least one of whom is in a critical condition. It is the 5th mass shooting in the United States this month. Labour's called for a parliamentary inquiry into allegations the chairman of the BBC helped Boris Johnson arrange an £800,000 loan. The former Prime Minister later recommended Richard Sharp for the role of the broadcaster. Mr Sharp insists there was no conflict of interest, while a spokesperson for the former Prime Minister has dismissed the report as rubbish. He has been in Ukraine today at the invitation of Volodymyr Zelensky. Meanwhile, a cabinet minister has told GB News Nadhim Zahawi has the Prime Minister's support following allegations about his tax affairs. The Conservative Party chairman is under pressure over claims he tried to avoid tax and had to pay it back in a multi-million-pound settlement with HMRC. Labour has called his position untenable, but the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says he believes Mr Zahawi's paid his taxes.
I don't know any more details than what he has already put in the public domain. I don't think it would be right or proper for me to speculate or guess about any further details about his tax affairs. But he has been a successful entrepreneur, building a company which has paid tax, employing people who have paid taxes, and he has himself paid tax, a considerable amount, because he's been successful.
TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. But don't go anywhere, because Calvin will be back in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to the Common Sense Crusade with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, on your TV, online and on your wireless. A Tory MP and former minister has said a majority of Conservative MPs have serious worries about the government's proposed ban on transgender conversion therapy. Tim Loughton said a majority certainly have got some serious worries about this. He added, "It is not a political divide, it's people who have women's rights at the heart and people who have children's welfare at heart." Earlier this week, Michelle Donnellan, the Culture Secretary, announced government plans to publish shortly a draft banning gay and transgender conversion therapy. To discuss this, I'm joined by political commentator Connor Tomlinson, and still with us is former Labour advisor and writer Scarlett Maguire. My token lefty for today, Scarlett. Connor, do you think Kemi Badenoch is right to seek balance between protecting trans people and defending the rights of parents to express their concerns?
Absolutely. I think also we need to distinguish the types of so-called conversion therapy. Because if you want to talk about sexuality conversion therapy, I don't think we should be criminalising conversations at all, but then people are making the case of, well, some people may be born same-sex attracted, and this isn't something that you can socially overwrite, so the efficacy of those conversations is in doubt. But what is the really frustrating thing, and I interviewed Richie Herron recently, the man who is suing the NHS for repeatedly being pushed down the path of transitioning to the point of where he had the bottom surgery done, it went wrong, and it's frankly ruined his life. Lovely guy. My concern is that you're going to, in restricting these conversations, push people down the irrevocable, damaging path of surgery, of chemical castration with puberty blockers, by doing only social affirmation. And so I don't see how you can conflate conversion therapy from one sexuality to another which you may be biologically not, but it is not conversion to say, oh, you, a man, are a man. But it's not conversion therapy to say, you are a man and you want to be a woman, therefore lock bits off yourself and put yourself in a dress and you can approximate womanhood. You can't countenance that. It doesn't make sense.
I mean, that's a fair point. Scarlett, Connor says it's criminalising conversations. I think it's also potentially criminalising parents, therapists, doctors and priests.
No, I think this is absolutely untrue. I mean, what's important is that the legislation is drafted properly so you can have conversations. There's no question that, I mean, quite often when a gay person comes out, a gay or lesbian person comes out to their parents, their mum or dad will go, really? But, I thought. I mean, that is not conversion. Conversion therapy is when people believe that they know best. Conversion therapy is saying to a gay man, you are not gay, right? There is something wrong with you. We have to change it. So this whole thing about it being about conversations is completely and utterly wrong. And what's really important...
But let's look at an example where that's happened. So in Canada, there was a teenage girl who wanted to convert and the parents said, no, you have to wait until you're an adult. And she sued the parents. And actually, because of the conversion therapy ban, the parent got not just fined, but had to go to prison.
No, well... That's bad legislation, right? So what you do is you put in good legislation that protects, in particular, protects minors, right? Okay. And that's what we need. And we need to be having a conversation about how to protect people, how to understand that a 16-year-old thinking something is not necessary. They don't understand what it's going to mean for the rest of their lives.
That we agree on. So would you go both ways in what Connor said? Conversion therapy banning people pushing you to go down the trans route if you're a minor?
Oh, completely.
Okay.
I mean, absolutely. What I think is that people should be able to make up their mind, and it's very, very important, particularly for adolescents, that you let them make up their mind and you let them change their mind as often as they want to, which is what is happening in a lot of schools.
Okay, and Connor, Scarlett says she trusts that there'll be good, sound legislation around this. Do you trust the Conservatives to create good legislation?
I don't trust any government on this, especially when it's founded on the fundamental premise that you can change your sex and that somehow it's conversion therapy to tell you, no, you are born in the correct body. The frustration here, right, is that if you instantiate only one form of therapeutic intervention into law, only gender affirmation, something we don't do for any other psychological condition, for example, we don't tell anorexics that, yes, you really are too fat, we'll give you states-funded liposuction, so until your body is brought in line with your mind. No, we treat the mind. We make sure that it's brought back in line with reality. If you take out the ability to say, a man is a man and you cannot change into a woman no matter how many surgeries or hormones or whatever you take, then the problem is you're never going to actually address the mental health problems, the high suicidality of the trans community, and all you're going to do is shut doctors out of the debate when they're trying to help these people.
OK, well, a spokesman for the Equalities Office said the government has held a full and open consultation on plans to ban conversion therapy, in which it sets out a number of proposals to protect people from this abhorrent practice. We will publish a bill which will go through pre-legislative scrutiny in this parliamentary session. We hope to send it to a joint committee for scrutiny and we'll work with the liaison committee accordingly. There are clearly issues that are not fully resolved. We are determined that legislation will not cause harm to children and young adults experiencing gender-related distress by inadvertently impacting on legitimate conversations parents or clinicians may have with their children. Pre-legislative scrutiny exists to prevent this and other unintended consequences by utilising stakeholder expertise and input from parliamentarians. Now, speaking of bad legislation, the King's coronation will reportedly aim to be a majestic but inclusive celebration in an attempt to reflect modern Britain. I can already see Connor in the corner of my eye sighing. A coronation choir will apparently include singers from refugee choirs, NHS choirs, LGBTQ singing groups and deaf singing choirs. King Charles will reportedly wear military uniform instead of the traditional breeches and stockings that his grandfather King George VI, great-grandfather King George V and great-great-grandfather King Edward VII wore. So should the King have an inclusive or traditional coronation? Scarlett, what do you think?
I think he's trying to please everybody, and he's going to not please anybody. I mean, I think the whole thing is a pretense, isn't it? So we're going to have all these people, and but at the end of it, we'll have a party for the people who really, really matter. I mean, what is this coronation? And I mean, I'm sure GB News would consider King Charles the woke king. I mean, it seems slightly crazy to me that, and it's an effort. The real joke is that everybody covering the coronation will call it an incredible success. It's Britain at its best. It shows that Britain can do pageantry, but actually, you know, I mean, it's just madness.
Well, I'm glad we agree on that as well. Connor, this idea of a multicultural coronation ceremony. Now, the coronation ceremony is British, therefore it should be celebrating British culture. We can say we live in a multicultural society, we can say it's a good thing or a bad thing, but the ceremony of a new king being installed surely should be British.
Absolutely. We have a culture that is very particular, it is parochial, and dare we say it specifically on a station named after Great Britain, it's the best. It should be unapologetically, I say this as a Catholic even, Anglican and particularly British. It shouldn't be this multicultural hodgepodge. I saw a government representative, it was written in the Telegraph when they were reporting on this, that they wanted it to showcase the Best of Britain PLC. Now, that reads like, oh, yeah, this is how we're going to market Britain to the world. I don't want the most amount of return for shareholders for our cultural exports. I don't want to be inclusive and accessible to everyone. I want my country to be particularly British. I want it to be celebrated that. And I think the main thing here, the reason why it's not particularly British, is because we see the intersections of the NHS, so the new civic religion, the LGBT lobby, a new civic religion, and now refugees. We've had this wedge issue from Justin Welby, from the King. These are all people we have to pay to as aggrieved groups. It's the supplementary religion to Christianity.
I'll get back to that because you mentioned the royal source that called us the UK PLC. Scott, is this not the issue? That the country seems to be looked at based on GDP, based on marketing value. I mean, everything comes down to money.
It's complete madness. And you know, we're going to have an amazing pop concert with people from all over the world. So it's really, but can I say, the NHS is British, right? And LBG, lesbians and gay people are British, right? I think
the ideology is nothing to do with the people. It is homogenising a group of people based on sexual characteristics and their sexual preferences, an endlessly expanding acronym, and it is a Trojan horse for lots of people who would like to destroy the country because they have socialist grievances.
No, it's absolutely not.
Absolutely is true.
No, it's absolutely. I mean, people who are gay and lesbian are gay and lesbian, right?
Yes.
That is the beginning and the end of it.
No, it's not.
If Charles wants to, you know, say, well, we're going to have these people and these people, that's his problem, right? But to blame a community who are British, right, is crazy.
The acronym is not a community.
Right. Well, they seem to have ticked every single box they could find, except for race. I don't see any mixed race issues on there, so
there'll be a lot of race. Let me.
They can't afford you, Calvin.
That was political commentator Connor Tomlinson and former Labour advisor and writer Scarlett Maguire. Thank you both very much. Michelle Donnellan, the Culture Secretary, said, "The weekend of events will bring people together to celebrate our monarchy and the mixture of tradition and modernity, culture and community that makes our country great. Everyone is invited to join in on any day, whether that is by hosting a special street party, watching the coronation ceremony, or spectacular concert on TV, or stepping forward during the big help out to help causes that matter to them." Now, while I was in Davos, I bumped into climate activist Greta Thunberg. As I said earlier, I went out to Davos with the Rebel News guys in a personal capacity, and my expenses were crowdfunded. I got the chance to ask Greta a few questions. Here's what she had to say.
It's your opportunity to stop and tell us what you care about and what you're fighting against. You seem to be joining the establishment, not fighting them anymore. Are you not one of them?
One of who?
What, the people on the private jets and the helicopters flying in here to tell us how to live our lives?
Yes, because I have many private jets of my own, yes.
The point being, you have to condemn all of them equally, otherwise it's hypocrisy, right? No? I don't see how that's funny.
I don't take anything seriously, so I laugh all the time, so don't take it personally.
Okay. Greta, do you make an opportunity to listen to different voices and opinions that differ from your own? Do you try and take challenge on board when it comes to climate?
Sure.
Every time a Western government implements a net zero policy, it's common folk that are suffering, especially in a cost of living crisis. Do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, it's horrible that people are being affected by different things, like example the climate crisis and so on. People are being displaced and losing their lives. It's horrible.
But they can't afford to eat or heat their homes because of the net zero policies.
Yeah, that's definitely why we are experiencing the cost of living crisis, yes.
I agree, thank you. Is the movement not turning people away from your cause? The tactics that are being employed?
På tiden säger jag, antar jag.
Do you agree with all the radical tactics people are taking in your name?
I think the only one taking action in my name is me, I hope.
But you are the leader of this movement.
I hope not.
Thank
you, this has been a pleasure. We're gonna leave now. We would appreciate if you didn't follow.
Thank you. Thanks, Greta.
Thank you.
As you can tell, I had a lovely time in Davos. This week we saw the return of the annual World Economic Forum meeting in Davos, with politicians and business leaders from around 130 countries descending on the Swiss town. However, with global leaders increasingly seeking to influence the policies of sovereign countries on everything from the economy to climate change, there are concerns that governments have less and less power over the affairs of their own country. So should the World Economic Forum supersede state sovereignty? Former advisor to President Trump and lecturer at Hillsdale College, Michael Anton, joins me now. Thank you for joining us this Sunday, Michael. Could you start off by telling us a bit about the history of the WEF and the power it does and does not have?
I don't know the history specifically. I think it started sometime in the late 70s. I know that Klaus Schwab, who founded it, is an economics professor in Germany and used to attend some of the other more secretive conferences like Bilderberg that used to be and still are to some extent considered by conspiracy theorists, rightly or wrongly, as hubs of globalist intrigue. And Klaus Schwab's great insight was, well, we can actually do better. Instead of let's have the same conference, but instead of making it secret, let's invite the press and let them cover it and let them write glowing stories about it. And let's, open it up to sort of sunshine. And maybe we can tamp down some of the conspiracy theories, but also with the glowing press, get much more global momentum or public support for our movement. And it's funny to me, or it's certainly telling, that I think it's been, from his perspective, a complete success, that Davos has now for 20 years, the World Economic Forum, been sort of the place to go, see and be seen and meet other people and expand your influence. There's hardly a CEO or a world leader that isn't there every year, or at least that hasn't been in the last 2 or 3 years. It's the kind of thing where if you don't go, you're really not part of the ruling cabal of the world. So while I disagree with most of its goals, I have to give Schwab and the WEF people credit that they set out to create the world's kind of most important consequential conference, and they did it.
Yeah, I mean, the WEF themselves would say that they're trying to promote world peace and cooperation between different nations. Surely that's a good thing.
Well, yeah, but cooperation toward what ends and on whose terms. So, I just watched a clip where you were talking about climate change, right? Well, yeah, they want cooperation. They want cooperation to, as they put it, fight climate change, to bring global emissions down. But that's also cooperation to cut the energy sector, to lower standards of living, to, make it more difficult to travel, and so on and so forth. So cooperation from their point of view ends up meaning a very constricted lifestyle from the point of view of a lot of other people who, of course, don't get invited to these meetings, never will get invited to these meetings, and really have no say as to what goes on. But when you have, the leading corporate CEOs from the United States, Europe, the Far East, mingling with world leaders, heads of state, heads of government, these people have a lot of power to cooperate and get their way regardless of what any of the rest of us actually think. And that's what makes the World Economic Forum, I think, a danger to, certainly, I don't want to speak for your country, but to the way of life that my country has been accustomed to for many decades, if not longer.
Perhaps not literal power, but a lot of influence. Schwab talks about penetrating the cabinets of people all around the world. But is it not right that Donald Trump opposed this agenda?
Donald Trump opposed this agenda, but the only time I've ever been to Davos, ironically, was in 2018 with Donald Trump. And he got a very friendly reception because he took a Davos-friendly message to Davos. That is to say, he was certainly against them on the climate change question. He was against them on the migration question. On many other things, he had a sort of anti-Davos agenda. But he was also very pro-business, and he wanted to make the case that America was a great place to invest, to open factories, and so on. And that's the message that he brought to Davos in 2018. And he didn't say any of the many critical things that I think he could have said, and so was received in a friendly way by Schwab himself and by the rest of the audience. It's a difficult fine line to walk for an American president or anyone interested in developing the American economy. You don't want to cut yourself off from these powerful figures, corporate CEOs and so on. You don't want to have bad relations with the other countries of the world, including with leaders of those other countries that maybe don't share your agenda, but you also don't want to abandon your agenda. And Trump, I think, walked it reasonably well. But now we have a completely different administration in the United States that I would say is more or less fully aligned with the Davos agenda, and there isn't really a whole lot of pushback or resistance to it anymore, either here or around the world.
Yeah, it's a great shame. I think Trump played the game very well there. Thank you for that analysis. That was former advisor to President Trump and lecturer at Hillsdale College, Michael Anton. Thank you so much for your time today. We reached out to the WEF for a comment, but they are yet to respond. But here is the mission statement from the WEF website. The World Economic Forum is the international organization for public-private cooperation. The forum engages the foremost political, business, cultural, and other leaders of society to shape global, regional, and industry agendas. We believe that progress happens by bringing together people from all walks of life who have the drive and influence to make positive change. Each week on the show, we like to end with our closing prayer, and today's collect is: Almighty and everlasting God, mercifully look upon our infirmities, and in all our dangers and necessities stretch forth thy right hand to help and defend us. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. You have been watching Calvin's Common Sense Crusade with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson. I'll be back with you next Sunday at 3 p.m. Nana Akoya is up next, but before that, here is the latest weather forecast. God bless and Deus Vult.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Today and over the next few days, the UK is a bit of a battleground between cold and milder air. High pressure over Scandinavia, but stretching its way down into southeastern areas of England is holding the cold air intact here. The frontal systems, though, that are trying to push their way into the north and west are also dredging up some milder air. Milder air at this time of the year, though, is accompanied by a fair amount of cloud, and we will see some patchy outbreaks of rain and drizzle continuing across southwest Scotland and other Irish Sea coastal areas overnight. Where we hold on to the clearer skies, further to the south and east, temperatures will be dropping off quite rapidly down to -5, -4 Celsius in some towns and cities. This will be accompanied by freezing fog developing overnight. Could be quite dense in places, so do just take care where you are heading out first thing on Monday morning. Likely to linger through the morning across the likes of Cambridgeshire, but eventually clearing away to allow some brighter spells. Cloud pushing its way into Kent and areas of East Anglia. Meanwhile, the cloud over northern and western areas is going to remain fairly persistent, and it could be another largely grey day with further outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Going to stay mild in the north and west, though, highs of 9, 10 degrees Celsius here, but only around 3 degrees further to the south and east. Into Monday evening, it's a relatively similar picture, but because we've now got the cloud filtering its way into the far southeast, the frost will just hold off a bit more here, and it'll be that central slice of England where